This is the history of the Meteor Class episodes. I must ask you to please forgive my stutter. I can't not stutter. I have a neurological condition called ADHD, and I also have high functioning autism and a learning disability. I can't not stutter. The Meteor Class, Germany's naval misstep. Everybody loves a story of grand ambitions until things go south. Let's dive into the tale of the Meteor Class ships. Built in the late 1880s and the early 1890s, the Meteor Class comprised two ships, Meteor and Comet. These ships were the German Imperial Navy's answer to a pressing problem. The Imperial Navy began building small avisos in the 1880s to serve the main fleet in German waters. These vessels were intended to support the battle line as scouts for the fleet, as flotilla leaders for the fleet's torpedo boats, and as a main screen against enemy torpedo boats. Unlike the contemporary German unprotected cruisers, their designs emphasize offensive capability and high speed rather than long cruising radius. In 1888, the German Naval Command decided that future avisos should be focused solely on defense against hostile torpedo boats. Compared to the earlier Wacht-class avisos, the Meteor design was slightly smaller and displaced around 25% less than the earlier vessels. The primary alterations included the more powerful propulsion system, a new gun armament of quick-firing cannons, and slightly thicker armor plating. The Meteor and Comet proved to be failures in service. But here's where things start to unravel. Both ships suffered from poor seakeeping. Imagine trying to keep balance on a surfboard during a storm. That's how they felt in rough seas. And if that wasn't enough, their propeller shafts vibrated excessively, making the ride anything but smooth. Comet barely saw action, only coming out of the docks to test failed fixes, and their small size rendered them poor seaboats. These defects significantly curtailed their careers, and they spent most of their existence in reserve. The Meteor Class was the second to last episode design produced by the Imperial Navy, followed only by the Hella class by the 1890s. German naval designers had taken the best characteristics of the avisos and the contemporary unprotected cruisers and combined them into the Gazelle class of light cruisers, the first vessels of that type of warship. General characteristics and machinery. Meteor and Comet were 262 feet at the waterline and 262 feet overall. They had a beam of 31 feet 4 inches and a maximum draft of 12 feet 1 inch forward. Meteor displaced 961 metric tons as of designed, and up to 1,078 metric tons at full combat load, while Comet was slightly heavier at 992 metric tons and 1,117 metric tons respectively. Their hulls were constructed from transverse steel frames. Meteor was intentionally fitted with a single pole mainmast, while Comet had the pole mainmast along with a smaller mast further aft for wireless telegraphy. You know those click wireless signal receiver and stuff things. I can't even speak right now. From 1901 to 1902, Meteor was fitted with a second mast as well. The Meteor class ships had a crew of 7 officers and 108 enlisted men. These ships carried several smaller boats, including 1 yawl, 1 dinghy, and 1 cutter. These were poor seaboats. They were very unstable in anything but calm weather. They also vibrated excessively due to severe cavitation, particularly at high speeds. These ships were, however, very maneuverable. Their metacentric height was 1 foot 4 inches. Their propulsion system consisted of 2 vertical 3-cylinder triple expansion engines that drove a pair of 9 feet 4 inches wide 3-bladed screw propellers. Steam for the engines was provided by 4 coal-fired locomotive boilers that were trunked into 2 funnels at the center line. The ships were equipped with a pair of electric generators with a combined output of 20 to 24 kilowatts at 67 volts. Steering was controlled by 1 rudder. The ship's propulsion system varied slightly in performance. Meteor's engines were rated at 4,500 metric horsepower for a top speed of 19 knots, though she exceeded those figures during sea trials, reached a speed of 20 knots. Comet's engines were rated at 5,000 metric horsepower and 19.5 knots, which she did not exceed during her trials. Both ships had a range of approximately 960 nautical miles at 9 knots. And just so you know, 9 knots is like 10 miles an hour, so it was really slow. Anyway, armament and armor. These ships were armed with 4 88mm SKL-30 guns placed in single pivot mounts, 2 side-by-side forward and 2 side-by-side aft. These guns were supplied with 462 and 680 rounds of ammunition. They had a range of 6,900 meters. They also carried 3 35-centimeter torpedo tubes, one mounted submerged in the bow and the other 2 on the deck-mounted launchers on the broadside. They were supplied with 8 torpedoes. Both ships were protected with steel armor. They had 15mm thick deck with a 25mm thick sloped sides. The conning tower had 30mm thick armor plating on the sides and 15mm thick roof. These torpedoes at that time were pretty small compared to nowadays. I mean, it was the 1800s and the beginning of the 20th century, so what you expect? The ships of the Meteor Class. SMS Meteor was the lead ship of her class, which included one other ship, Comet. SMS Comet was the second and final member of the Meteor Class Avisos. SMS Meteor was built by the Germanwirft in Kiel. She was laid down in December 1888 and was launched on the 20th of January 1890 and was completed on May 15th, 1891. SMS Comet, on the other hand, was built by A.G. Vulcan in Stettin. She was laid down in November 1891, launched on the 15th of November 1892, and completed on April 29th, 1893. Chapter 3. The Service History of the Meteor Class. After Meteor entered service, the problems with her design became apparent. Attempts to remedy the defects and sea trials to determine the effectiveness occupied much of the ship's first 2 years in service. This period also saw the ship take part in training exercises with the rest of the German fleet. By 1893, Comet had also entered service. She also underwent ultimately ineffective modifications following her initial trials. Meteor was employed as a fisheries protection vessel from 1895 to 1896, though she proved unsuited to the task, owing to her small size, which limited the amount of coal she could store, and thus the amount of time she could remain on patrol in Germany's coastal waters. I can't even speak sometimes. You must excuse my ADHD and stuff. It's part of who I am. I can't form a full sentence without stuttering sometimes. As a result, she was withdrawn from that service in late 1896. Comet never saw an extended period of active service. Only her periods in commission were to conduct trials after alterations were made to the ship. She, too, was laid up in 1896. Both ships were reclassified as light cruisers in 1899, and then reduced to harbor guard ships in 1904. Both ships were struck from the Naval Register in 1911, with Meteor becoming a barracks ship in Kiel, and Comet being converted into a storage hulk for naval mines. Pretty sad, but I mean, I can't blame them. They were pretty poor ships. I wonder if there was a way to save them from this fate. But who knows? History is history. You can't change. The past is the past, but you can make way for the future. Meteor and Comet were sold for scrapping in 1919 and 1921, respectively. In the end, the Meteor Class ships serve as a reminder that even the best laid plans can sometimes go awry. But hey, that's naval history for you, full of ambition, innovation, and occasionally a splash of failure. But that's also the parts of history that we need to learn about and learn from, because those are the parts of history that makes us a better future. That's it for this video. I hope you learned something, despite of how chaotic this video was. Hit that like button and subscribe for more history.